We actually start the question period. Let me just make a comment here in that it's a little disturbing this week to see matters that were going to be addressed in questions that were put to ministers this week being part of headlines in the newspaper in discussion already. And let me remind members that once a question is put, there's a sanctity to protect in the process. That if you want an answer from the ministers, if you want it to be addressed in Parliament, let it be addressed in Parliament. You can take it and respond to it in public after you get your response. But once you start the process should follow through here first before we pick up the newspapers and start reading the similar topic in the paper. So I put that out as a caution to all members. Be mindful of how the process should work. And I feel I should not have to address that again. With that said, we'll now start the question period. And we know we have 60 minutes for that. And we're now setting our clock to start the 60 minutes. This morning, we have written questions before we go to the statements. And the first written question this morning has an alteration to that should have been noted as well, and that it's MP Dunkley who's going to put the first set of questions to the Minister of Finance. And MP Dunkley, would you like to put your questions?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and good morning to colleagues. Will the Honourable Minister, this is the Minister of Finance, will the Honourable Minister please confirm for this Honourable House the total amount of unfunded liability for the Public Service Superannuation Fund, the Government Health Insurance Fund, the members of the Legislature and Ministerial Fund for the years ending March 31st, 2020, March 31st, 2021, and December 31st, 2021. Thank you.
Thank you. Minister, would you like to reply?
Mr. Speaker, before I get into the substantive answers, we do not have figures yet for December 31st of 2021, as that was a mere 5 weeks ago, and so the numbers are not readily available.
Noted.
With respect to the PSSF, as of March 31st, 2020, the unfunded liability was $1,025,908,000. For 2021, $1,078,610,000. With respect to the members and ministers, MMLPF, the unfunded liability at the end of March 31, 2020 was $20,801,000. At the end of 2021, $22,199,000. For GEHI, March 31st, 2020, $779,397,564. And March 31, 2021, $841,552,405.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, I don't have any supplementary. I don't, unless others do.
None have a supplementary on this? None? Mr. MP Dunkley, would you like to put your second question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister of Finance please inform this Honourable House the action the Minister has taken to clear these unfunded liabilities during these fiscal years 2021, 2020-21 and 21-22? Thank you, sir.
Minister.
Speaker, honourable members will be aware that the accumulation of the significant unfunded liabilities or obligations with respect to these funds has been an ongoing matter that extends for decades. I'm advised by the Public Funds Investment Committee that I am the first Minister of Finance who has decided to tackle this head on. And I think the honourable members will recall that in August of might have been last year, I advised the Honourable House that I had retained services of McKinsey and Company to come in and work with the government on developing a strategy around resolving some of these long-standing significant issues. As I mentioned earlier in my ministerial statement, McKinsey has done a bunch of work helping to develop a common set of facts that have been shared with key stakeholders and have laid out a range of solutions on how we can start to tackle this problem over the long haul. Further work will need to be done to kind of understand the legal implications of any proposed changes. That work is ongoing. So the work has started. It will be a long-term initiative, and it's ongoing with respect to trying to correct this problem and make the size of the unfunded liabilities substantially smaller.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Not myself, Mr. Speaker, perhaps others.
Any member?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
None? Yes. Opposition leader? Put your supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the minister's answer, and I would like to know when he envisions having the report completed and when he envisions making that report public.
Understood?
Mr. Speaker, I didn't mention a report. I mentioned the scope of work that's being done and the series of recommendations, and I have committed this year to kind of trying to bring some conclusion to the recommendations and the implementation of the recommendations. Honourable members should appreciate that this involves extensive negotiations with key stakeholders, unions, employees, as we start looking at ways of kind of potentially impacting benefits, retirement age, contribution rates, investment performance. This is a fairly complicated piece of work, and it's going to take some time. The ongoing review from a legal perspective is an important gating item for further work to be done. But our commitment is to try to get this work done over the course of this fiscal year 22-23.
Thank you.
No further supplementaries?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
MP Chairman, put your supplementary.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Minister. In terms of the review that's ongoing, are all potential solutions on the table? Are there any potential solutions that are not on the table? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
There are 4 levers that can be tinkered with. One is contribution amounts. The other is retirement age. Third is the scope of the benefits. And the fourth would be the investment performance. And all 4 levers are under active review.
Any further supplementary?
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are none. MP Dunkley, would you like to put your third question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister of Finance please confirm for this Honourable House whether or not the unfunded pension liabilities have been included in the government's total outstanding debt as of March 31st, 2020, March 31st, 2021, and December 31st, 2020? Thank you.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the total pension and other employee obligations net of the underlying assets and unamortized experience gains or losses are recorded on the statement of financial position in the audited statements of the consolidated fund. As of the 31st of March of 2021, this balance totaled $1,751,448,297. A figure is also included in the net debt shown on the statement of financial position, which was $4,618,103,340 as of March 31st, 2021.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Not for myself, Mr. Speaker.
Any member have a supplementary? There are none. Thank you for that series of questions and answers. And now move on to the next question on the order paper today. And that question is from the opposition leader, again to the Minister of Finance. Opposition leader, would you like to put your question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Go right ahead.
Will the Honourable Minister please confirm for this Honourable House the total amount of the accounts due Bermuda government in taxes and fees as at December 31st, 2021?
Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, I would refer honourable members to my prior comments with respect to December 31st being a mere 5 or 6 weeks ago, and the financial statements and the work being done to close the quarter have not yet been completed. What I can provide, though, is a thumbnail sketch or summary of relevant numbers with respect to the Ministry of Finance, in particular the Office of the Tax Commissioner, and the Register of Companies. The caveat that there are a number of departments within the government that have amounts that are outstanding or past due. In light of the fact that the OTC and the ROC, as of March 31st of 2021, their arrearages represent about 87% of the outstanding amounts for the entire government. We've extrapolated the figures from December 31st for the ROC and the OTC to give a number that we estimate for the government, which would be about $197,743,000.
Thank you. Supplementary?
No, that's it for me.
Okay, any other member? Okay, Opposition Leader, would you like to put your second question?
Will the Honourable Minister please confirm to this Honourable House the amount of accounts receivables recovered during the fiscal years 2021 and obviously 2022, but I suspect he may not have the 2021 complete, 21-22 completed. But he can give a good estimate. Thank you.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, amounts paid can be tracked at an individual level, however, due to the nature of our reporting systems. Determining the total amounts collected for dates outside of year ends is an onerous and time-consuming exercise. What we can report is that for the OTC for the period from the April 20th to January 2022, total taxes collected totaled $84 million, which included both current and arrears. For the ROC for the period April 20 to December 2021, they collected $5.7 million.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Would you like to put your third question, Opposition Leader?
Will the Honourable Minister please confirm from this Honourable House the total receivables recovered by ORS Inc. and the total fees due and paid to them to date, and the fees due and paid to audit firm EY for the years 2021 and 2021-22 to date for services rendered?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 17G6 precludes the asking of a question if a question is likely to prejudice a matter which is under trial and therefore sub judice. The proceedings in train and counsel instructed on both sides, this question goes to the heart of the matter at the bar with respect to ORS. With respect to payments to EY, total payments to EY were provided in a response to parliamentary questions received in November of 2021. At that time, payments to EY totaled $4.4 million, of which 4.3 were in respect of the Caroline Bay and the provision of joint prisoner liquidator services. Additional payments in the amounts of $39,000 have been made to date, including $12,000 for the Ministry of Finance with respect to loan professionals for tax data discovery engagement, and $27,000 for the Cabinet Office for the completion of a technology roadmap engagement.
Thank you, Minister. Supplementary?
That's all for me. Thank you, Minister.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary is that MP Perman?
MP Pearman. Yes, Minister. The allegation that matters are sub judice and before the courts, could you simply confirm what matter before the court you're referring to?
The government and ORS are engaged in a dispute with the courts with respect to the provision of certain services to the government.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, thank you. No further supplementaries? Thank you, members. That brings those questions to a close. And now we'll move on to the next question this morning. And that question is from Opposition Whip to the Minister of National Security. Mr. Whip, would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister please inform this Honourable House if government policy explicitly or implicitly prohibits the continued existence of gangs or criminal organizations, howsoever described?
Minister?
Sorry. This government neither supports nor condemns gangs or criminal organizations. We have laws that are in place that provide penalties, including incarceration for criminal offenses. This government has a policy of providing programs to at-risk youth to minimize the likelihood of them joining gangs or becoming involved in criminal activity or organizations. They also provide assistance to gang members who wish to change their lives around.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Supplementary.
The Honourable Minister referred to gang culture as a cancer which needs to be arrested and eliminated. Did the Minister just say she neither she doesn't deny, she neither supports gang culture nor denies gang culture whilst calling it a cancer? Good morning, Mr. Speaker. That's not what the Minister said.
No, the minister's going to clarify. If the minister had the opportunity to clarify, so. Yeah, minister.
Member, I did not in any way say that. And if you were unclear, I'll just read to you what I said again. I said the government the government neither supports nor condemns gangs or criminal organizations. We have laws that are in place that provide penalties, including incarceration for criminal offenses. This government has a policy of providing programs to at-risk youth to minimize the likelihood of them joining gangs or becoming involved in criminal activity or organizations. We also provide assistance to gang members who wish to change their lives around.
Thank you for the clarity, Minister.
Supplemental, I stand excited, Mr. Speaker. I was referring to a statement made by the Minister this morning in her ministerial statement. Can I not refer to that?
Yeah, your question right now should be based on your question that's written. And if you want to address the ministerial statement, you can address the ministerial statement when we get to ministerial statements. With the question period right now is still on the written questions.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification, Mr. Speaker. I'll move on to question number 2.
Go ahead.
Will the Honourable Minister please inform this Honourable House the current gangs and number of members on island?
Mr. Speaker, I think that the question that I have from the member says, will the Honourable Minister please inform this Honourable House the current gangs and confirmed numbers of members on island? Is that correct?
And numbers of members on the island.
Yes, but he left out the word confirmed.
Okay. Actually, it's left off the question that's written before us on the order paper as well. But the gist of it is current numbers of gangs and current numbers of members.
Okay. I think the honourable member will appreciate that we cannot provide any confirmed numbers, and that, because there isn't a gang registry within the Ministry of National Security or the police. But we have from the Bermuda Police Service an estimate that there are at least 9 gangs, and they also have estimated between 200 and 250 members.
Supplementary?
None for now, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Would you like to do your third question?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Will the Honourable Minister please inform this Honourable House what the plan is to reduce the recruitment and participation in gangs?
Sure. I remind my honourable colleague of my statement to this Honourable House on the 26th of November, where I stated that our plan was to change the pattern of behavior of individuals involved in group and gang violence, and to reintegrate them back into mainstream society, to prevent preteens and adolescents from joining gangs and engaging in antisocial behavior by reestablishing positive social bonds, to create opportunities of employment for young people and individuals who have previously not been employable due to antisocial backgrounds, to reconnect at-risk youth to reconnect at-risk youth, men and women, with the necessary helping agencies that will aid in addressing mental and social health issues, to place more focus on fostering and sustaining positive interpersonal relationships. We're taking a multi-agency approach that includes the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Labor, the Ministry of Social Development and Seniors, Ministry of Youth, Culture and Sport. We'll also be partnering with third sector agencies and employers to provide additional services and opportunities for our at-risk youth, including counseling services, individual programs of social support and care, education assistance, mentorship, pathways to further education, opportunities for social mobility, career guidance, family counseling and support, financial assistance, and employment opportunities. There is no one size fits all at all, and each at-risk youth will be assessed to match the right services and programs to meet their needs.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, could you clarify what is meant when you said financial assistance would be provided?
At times, member, we may have someone who may need assistance with actually just negotiating or navigating through financial assistance. And so that we offer this type of services as well. Just sometimes it's just navigating through what the government services can be.
For the supplementary?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Supplementary. Thank you. Who determines which services get matched with which case? Would the Honourable Minister please clarify who determines which service gets matched with which case?
We have the gang violence reduction team has outreach services, and they can consist of some of them may be social workers, some may be counselors, and they try to work with at-risk youth to determine what services they need. But of course, that comes with actually being able to sit down, to have talks, to trying to get to exactly what issues someone may have. I'm sure, member, you can appreciate that the problem that is before us is I said it already, it's a community problem. And so it takes each and every one of us to be able to assist where we can. We have persons who volunteer their services, and it's a very it's a fine line and a balance, and it's definitely about relationships and being able to find the right relationship, and then also be able to see what's the best caring and services that we can put in place.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Members, that brings us to.
Mr. Speaker?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not as good as, I'd like to ask a question if possible.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Supplementary from the Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, put your supplementary.
Minister, what year did the governor deny approval for former Premier Dr. Brown to bring in assistance to deal with the proliferation of gangs?
Member, if my memory serves me correctly, I believe that was in 2008.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Further supplementary? Further supplementary?
No, that's fine, Speaker. Thank you.
I see someone's mic flashing here. Is that MP Jackson?
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker. I have a question. I'm just curious with regard to the plan to reduce the recruitment and participation in gangs. Minister, are you seeing an influx or an increase in children or young adults actually moving off island in order to remove themselves from gangs? Are we seeing a trend of people leaving the island in order to remove their families from exposure to gangs?
Minister?
Member, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Member, I think we're aware of some persons who have relocated themselves, but I cannot say to you at this time that it would be a trend.
And further supplementary?
Thank you.
Any member? Any member?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
MP Donkey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Honourable Minister for the answer to the questions, and I think we all agree that gangs are a cancer and a culture that we must eliminate. The question to the Honourable Minister, does the Honourable Minister believe that reduced manpower levels within the Bermuda Police Service and the reduced budgets are impacting the BPS ability to tackle these issues of enforcement and of community involvement? Thank you.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the police service does have their operational responsibilities with the governor. They are also, they prioritize the matters that the island has in front of them. So I cannot say that the reduced budget or any reduction in persons has impacted, because as I said in my statement, the police are evolving, and they even we even spoke about the fact that they have they learned from lessons learned. And so
Minister, let me just bring to your attention, we're still responding to the written questions. So any reference to your statement, we can leave that until we get to a question to the statement. So, if you need to direct people to that, just direct them to that, and that question can come back at that time. But I wouldn't want you to bring the statement into this line of question, because this line of question is specifically to the written questions that were put to you.
Okay. So my response would be no, I do not.
Okay. Thank you. Supplementary from anyone else? No supplementaries? Thank you. The next question is actually a written question. The other three, the previous three questions are all for oral response. The fourth question is from MP Jackson to Minister of Transport, and we're seeking a written response rather than oral response. So my question to MP Jackson is, have you received your written responses?
Mr. Speaker? Yes, I'm sorry. I would suspect that they're en route. I haven't received them through the tablet as yet, but I'm waiting the responses. But
they should be up on the SharePoint where you can retrieve them off the SharePoint.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. That brings us, members, to a close of the written questions. We will now move on to the questions that arise out of this morning's statements. The first statement that has a question this morning is the statement from the Minister of Finance. Minister of Finance, the opposition leader would like to put a question to you in reference to your statement. And opposition leader, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I believe I sent a note to you, ask questions to the Honourable Premier regarding tourism.
It may have come down the line. Yep. Yeah, it is. It was out of the order that I picked. Okay. Being I put the one for the Minister of Finance, let him do his, because he's only got one question to him, then I'll come back to yours. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Finance and Opposition Leader.
Thank you. Can the Minister of Finance provide us with the value of the CPF fund as at the end of 2017, 2018, and 2020?
Mr. Speaker, I can provide those amounts under separate cover, but have the information readily available. You said 17?
Hang on. For the 3-year period. So 17, 18, and 20.
So you want me to skip 19?
You can put 19 if you want.
Okay. And is it March 31st or is it December 31st?
March 31st.
We'll provide those on a separate cover.
Thank you. My supplemental.
Supplementary?
Yes. The minister stated that the fund earned a nominal rate of return net of investment expenses of 4% per annum and a real return of 3.6. Can the minister confirm the performance of the benchmarks used to support the investment strategy?
Minister?
Speaker, I believe that information is contained inside of the report which was tabled today, so that it's now in the public domain.
Okay. Second sub? Or further sub by anybody? Any member?
My second supplementary,
Okay.
he goes on to say that the net assets of the fund grew 2.2% over 3 years. Is this growth capital appreciation, or is it a combination of capital appreciation and capital contribution?
Understood.
The growth is the result of capital appreciation.
Thank you.
Hey, do you have a second question? You used your supplementaries.
That's my second question. The second question is, it pertains to the number of contributors. It says, since the last review, the number of contributors has declined from 35,889 to 34,629. My question is, there's a difference of 1,260 in reduction of contributors. Do you have a breakdown of how we arrived at this reduction? Did people leave the island? Did people die? Does he have any further explanations as to why we have this reduction?
Thank you. Minister?
Well, the number for the reason for the reductions would come up as a result of people having deceased, people having left the island, and then the obvious one, people having retired.
Okay, supplementary?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Third question?
The final question that I have is, total expenses for the 3 years averaged 4.2% of the average fund, up from 0.37 over the previous 3 years. To me, this is a 5 basis point increase. Can you explain why we are having these increases?
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have that information available to me, but I certainly can investigate and revert.
Okay. The minister's indicated he'll seek the information and have it made available for you later.
Thank you very much.
There's a third question. Any supplementaries to it?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Minister of Finance, that's the only member who indicated that they had a question for you. So we'll now move on. Thank you for your question. And obviously then answers Minister. The next will go to the Premier. On your statement this morning, reference to tourism, this year's recovery, and the MP Dunkley has a question for you. MP Dunkley, you can put your question to the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Premier, in your statement on page 2, you referenced streamlining border entry requirements. In light of the fact that an antigen test is accepted for pre-arrival in Bermuda and for day 4 testing in Bermuda, is part of that streamlining consideration the use of the antigen test only on arrival in Bermuda?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I will tell the honourable member that we will go one better, as the Honourable Minister of Transport gave in his particular statement. For visitors to the country who have their vaccinations up to date, they will only require a pre-arrival test 48 hours in advance, which will be by antigen. They will not be required to do any testing on arrival or any subsequent testing on the island. With respect to persons who may not have their vaccinations up to date, or those persons who may have a prior coronavirus infection, they will be doing arrival testing, but that testing will be antigen testing. And the only PCR testing at the border will be for those persons who are returning residents who have not been vaccinated. So the answer to the honourable member's question is that we will go one better, and as in many places we are seeing, their only requirement will be a pre-arrival test that is going to be by antigen, and no subsequent testing on island for persons who have their vaccinations up to date.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just let me be clear to the Honourable Premier. Did you say visitors and local returning residents?
It becomes a little bit tricky, if I may reply, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I can make it a supplementary, Premier.
That's perfectly fine. I'm happy to clarify on the supplementary.
I took it as a clarity. You simply asked one point. Was it for visitors and locals as well? So that's a yes or no answer.
It's not a yes or no answer, Mr. Speaker. That's what I'm saying.
So let's do a supplementary.
I do that's a supplementary. Okay. So it's a supplementary. You could answer it as a supplementary, Premier.
Absolutely. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member will be aware, Bermuda cannot deny a returning resident from entering the country if they have not had a pre-arrival test. So the same regime will apply to residents. So, for example, if the honourable member were to travel overseas, and if the honourable member did have his vaccinations up to date, he could take a pre-arrival, a pre-departure test 48 hours in advance, and he would not be subject to arrival testing. However, a resident does not have to take a pre-departure test. And if they do not take a pre-departure test, they will be subject to an antigen test on arrival, but that will be the only test in which they have to take. So visitors have to have a pre-test because that's what we require for visitors. But residents who do not require a pre-test can do the pre-test, or they can just take the antigen test on arrival. But there'll be no subsequent testing as long as their vaccinations are up to date.
Supplementary?
No, Mr. Speaker, I thank the Premier for that answer, and that is certainly, I think, to be welcome news by the community. Second question,
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. MP
Supplementary from MP Pearman. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Honourable Premier, when will that start? Is that the 1st of April, or will it be an earlier date?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for my response.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. As was stated by the Honourable Minister of Transport in his statement, we are looking to bring in the border changes for testing at an earliest possible date, and the date of which we're targeting is March 7th. We are working with Bermuda Tourism Authority and the Ministry of Health to create a seamless visitor experience, simplification of the travel authorization form, in addition to the simplification of the travel authorization form for persons who require exit testing for the return to their particular jurisdiction, whether that be the United States or Canada, to make sure that they never have to leave their place of hotel or Airbnb in order to do that exit testing. So we're looking to put in place a QR code-based tele service where individuals can just scan and get their exit tested from the comfort of their home. So that is what's taking time. In order to do that, we want to make sure that create a completely seamless experience. What we've seen by other, I would say, travel partners such as JetBlue, where they've said people want to go to a place and not have to worry about any type of testing. And so what we are envisioning is visitors will land at the airport, they will get their exit tests handed to them, and they can do that via teleservice through an app from the comfort of their home and be able to get their exit tests issued, all included inside of that reduced $40 travel authorization fee. There are other jurisdictions who do not charge for travel authorization fees, but of course we recognize that people have to pay $50 and $60 and $70 to get a test back there, have to go somewhere to get it, etc. So we're trying to make the process as seamless as possible, and we have been working on the review of this policy since last November in anticipation of making sure that we streamline it. So the testing requirements, very specifically, will set to come into place on March 7th, 2022. That is the target date for those revised testing requirements at the border.
Second supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Seconds up. Go ahead.
Yes, Honourable Premier, given that those are all going to happen on or around the 7th of March, why are other matters being delayed to the 1st of April?
What other matters are you referring to?
The statement to the House today, the 1st of April.
Sorry?
The statement given to the House today that some of the matters would not take effect until the 1st of April. I'm just wondering why the two dates?
I'm not certain which matters you're referring to, Mr. Chairman, so if you can clarify that, I might be able to provide an answer.
I'm sorry, are all changes going to happen on or around the 7th of March, or are some not going to happen until the 1st of April?
There are numerous changes that are set to take effect. I think what the Minister of Health had indicated was speaking in regards to public health restrictions. We're speaking about border changes. There's a number of different things that are in place. So I think the Minister of Health has indicated that the transition period is to take place until the end of March. after that point in time. Speaking of local restrictions, the end of permissions for large group gatherings and necessity for social distancing and physical distancing requirements and all those other things. The timeline that is set for that is the end of March. So we're talking about two different things.
Right. And my question was, why the difference between the 2 days?
Well, the border policy is for policies at the border. The Minister of Health, in consultation with the Chief Medical Officer, makes a determination as to what the conditions in the country will be. We're speaking about border policy. There's a difference when we're talking about what the restrictions are inside of the circumstances. Those may be reviewed sooner or later. We saw that reviews happen with public health restrictions today, and there will be further reviews. But I think, as the Minister of Health very clearly said in her statement, there's a transition period that's expected to go up until the end of March. We want to ensure on that basis is following that, she has indicated that the only public health restrictions which are envisioned to happen will be to support the requirement for indoor masks be at a certain time. So that means by April 1st, what we will see is that there will no longer be large group exemptions, no legal requirement for physical distancing, etc. But I would hate for us to prejudge a debate, as we are going to be debating the extensions of the public health emergency order. And I do believe that the Minister of Health has already tabled that extension. So I don't want to anticipate that debate, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And no further supplementaries?
Mr. Speaker, I have a supplementary.
You have a supplementary?
Yes, it's with regarding mask wearing. I'm curious whether there will be any particular accommodation made for our school children and mask wearing in the classrooms and inside buildings.
Let me just ask you to throw that question, because again, the statement that we're speaking to right now in reference to the border crossings and how people are arriving into our borders and the restriction adjustments. The question that you're asking would be better suited to the Minister of Health.
Okay.
And that matter addresses the restrictions within the country itself. Okay?
Thank you.
No problem. MP Dunkley, you didn't have a third question?
No, I do have a second question, Mr. Speaker.
You have a second question?
Yes.
All right.
To the Honourable Premier, in regards to your statement and your comments on the work being done to open up the Fairmont Southampton, can you give this Honourable House an estimated commencement of the construction and the renovation and an estimated opening date for the hotel to receive its first guests again? In light of how serious our situation is, I think it would be important to get some timelines.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Member for his question, but it'll be premature for me to give that statement until the conclusion of what it is that we're working with. Right now, the target, the planned construction timeline is 15 months. And once commencement of construction starts, the anticipated date would be 15 months prior. We're working with the developers to try to make sure that we can streamline it, as we certainly want to ensure that the hotel property is able to receive guests in the summer of 2023. It is certainly the time period is past the spring of 2023, but we recognize there are important conferences that are on the calendar in October of 2023, specifically a very large conference. We want to make sure that this hotel is online prior to that point in time. We'll be able to give further details upon the conclusion of the negotiations. As I indicated in my statement, we received a substantial response from the developers today, and we'll be reviewing that this afternoon, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Supplementary?
Yes, supplementary to the Honourable Premier. Honourable Premier, in the third paragraph on the second page, you mentioned the introduction in the legislature today of a designated site order for the property, which is the first step to secure a casino license. In your opinion, Honourable Premier, are any new developments or refurbishment, renovations going to be dependent on a casino license going forward?
In my opinion, I think that will be up to individual developers, but what I can say is that for a property of this size and the importance to make sure that a property is commercially viable, the amounts of amenities of which you want to the site, to make sure that persons can be in situ during the shoulder season, the winter season, is certainly necessary. So I'd say in regards to this particular development, I think that it is an essential portion of what may make this project economically viable. So absolutely.
Well, thank you, Premier. Supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
Put your supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to the Honourable Premier. Premier, do you believe that there is a top number of casino licenses that are feasible for Bermuda to make it a successful industry?
Mr. Speaker, I will not be drawing the hypothetical. I'll just refer to the law as it currently stands, where there is a limit on the casino licenses which exists. And so if there wants to be a future debate on casino licenses, I'm happy to have that. But I will just refer to the law, where the law is very clear on the number of casino licenses that can be issued currently.
Third question, Mr. Speaker.
Third question, rather. Yep.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honourable Premier, further down the page, the Honourable Premier gives an update on the work being done to the property in the South Shore of the Bermudiana Beach. Honourable Premier, in the parting of ways, was there any cost involved with the parting ways with the prior co-developers, McLennan and Associates, and their associates?
Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I can advise that any costs that were paid were done according to the contract, and there were no additional adders that were outside of contract that were done in that separation.
Supplementary?
Yeah, just supplementary. Is that contract available for public consumption, or can the Premier provide the costs associated?
I'm happy to undertake that. That would be with the Bermuda Housing Corporation under the responsibility of the Minister of Public Works, the Acting Minister of Public Works, Minister Ferber. If there is a question that wishes to be submitted, we're happy to provide that information to the House and the public.
Thank you, Premier. Now, just the final supplementary. Yes, sir. Second supplementary, Honourable Premier, you mentioned, and I quote, there were several issues which arose during this period which ultimately resulted in BDCL parting ways with the co-developers. Can you name what those issues were?
Mr. Speaker, I'll just say this, that the pace of development and activity at the site did not represent Bermuda's urgent need for this project to realize a return on the investment. We needed to move faster and more decisively than the relationship allowed. Therefore, it was brought to an amicable end, and new bursts were brought in, and it can be seen the progress date since the change speaks to the importance of that decision.
Okay. That's your two subs. Any other member have supplementary?
Thank you.
No other member? Premier, that brings to a close the questions for you on your statement this morning. We've done the Minister of Finance. We'll now move on to the Minister of Health. Minister of Health? The MP Dunkley. MP Dunkley, you actually have a question here for the Minister of Health. Would you like to put your question?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honourable Minister of Health, Minister, appreciate the statement today, and we share in your real concern about the impact of COVID-19 on our island. The question, Mr. Speaker, pertains to the Minister's statement on page 4, where she mentions, the Honourable Minister mentions, in restaurants, members clubs, bars, gyms, and island boats, safety will no longer be mandatory, which means that a student's 7-day pass is no longer required for these venues. Can the Honourable Minister please amplify in what areas will safety continue to be required?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank that honourable member for the question. When you say amplify, do you want me to shout?
No, I just...
Safety will no
I'm sorry,
longer...
I should have been more succinct with my language.
It's okay.
Talking to a lawyer.
Following these regulations, Mr. Speaker, as of noon, well, as of 8 minutes ago, safety will no longer be required in any of the instances that we've mentioned. So there is no longer requirements for safety to enter any of these establishments.
Okay, let me ask a different way. It's supplementary. Yes. So where will safety be required?
There will be no legislative requirement for safety to ever be used. If businesses, on the other hand, wish to operate their businesses in a manner that suggests that they want safety for their patrons, that's a matter for them, but there will no longer be a legislative requirement for safety.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at.
Second thought?
No, not on that
question.
I will take any other supplementaries on this from colleagues before I move on to another question.
Anyone
I have a quick supplementary, Mr. Speaker.
MP Jackson?
Yes, with regard to SafeKey, is government committed to making any continued payments toward SafeKey? Do we pay at all for that service, for that application? And if so, will government continue to pay it even though it will not be in use other than those that voluntarily wish to use it?
The SafeKey, if persons wish to utilize SafeKey, for example, we do the antigen testing at the community centers for SafeKey. We will still continue to offer that particular provision. There may be circumstances where you'll note that large group exemptions will require a SafeKey, as Minister Peets has alluded to. So there may be certain circumstances where a SafeKey may be required if, for example, a person is applying for a large group exemption over the amount of $100 for an indoor event. The minister, in his discretion, may decide.
100 people. You said $100.
Yes, 100. Yes, thank you for that correction. The minister, in his discretion, may say, as part of me authorizing a large group exemption, I'm also requiring SafeKey. So there may be instances where a SafeKey will be required in those particular circumstances, and in order to facilitate that, we will continue to offer SafeKey at the community testing if it's needed.
And will there be costs?
Second supplementary?
Second supplementary, sorry, Mr. Speaker. So will government be charged for the use of that SafeKey then? I'm just trying to determine what the ongoing costs would be of having SafeKey.
Right. The cost associated with SafeKey obviously would be for the administration of the test, the person that's doing the saliva, as well as when you're booking a test. There's a booking fee through ResQuest for the booking of that particular test.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, MP Pearman.
MP Pearman, yes.
Minister, if SafeKey is being scrapped, why would the government wish a continuing cost simply on occasions when someone might voluntarily choose to use it? That doesn't sound very sensible.
Right. The cost associated with SafeKey is not with respect to the booking, with the booking through ResQuest, but there's a nurse or a swabber that's going to actually be facilitating the swabbing of the SafeKey. So you're not paying for the SafeKey, but the person that's administering the test obviously has to be paid for their services. There may be instances, as I've indicated, where a person applies for a large group exemption over 100 persons for an indoor event, and the Minister of Youth and Sport, in his discretion, may say, in order to facilitate the granting of that large group exemption indoors, you must have SafeKey. So therefore, we need to make sure it's still left available. So if a person does wish to attend that large group event, then they're able to avail themselves with getting the 36-hour antigen SafeKey. But the cost associated with SafeKey is simply for the person to do the swabbing. There is no booking fee for SafeKey.
Second supplementary.
Yeah, put your seconds up.
Thank you. So, Minister, when you said that emergency powers were only to be continued for mandatory mask wearing, that's not entirely true. They may be continued as well for SafeKey in certain circumstances. Is that more precise?
No, that's not precise. What I indicated is when we extend the emergency powers for the 31st of March, it will be only so that we can facilitate the requirement of indoor mandatory mask. The large group exemptions, all of that will fade away. The only thing that will be existing, the only reason we're going to extend the public health phase reopening emergency powers order at the 31st of March is so that we can allow for mandatory mask wearing indoors.
Okay. Any further supplementary?
Second question, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, put your second question, MP Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Honourable Minister, can the Honourable Minister give some clarification? Currently, schools are required to do testing of their students, both public and private schools. What is going to be the program or the restriction going forward in regards to school testing for our students, our young people?
Mr. Speaker, I would invite the Honourable Member to direct that question directly to the Minister of Education with respect to the testing regime, which does come within his remit. I'd hate to speak out of school, but he's far more equipped to address issues as it relates to ongoing school testing and the requirements for public and private schools within his remit.
Right. Supplementary?
Not unless others have, but I have a third question.
Third question, put your third question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Minister said she would meet with the group who had some concerns about our children wearing face masks in school. Has that meeting been set up?
I did indicate, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did indicate that I would make a consideration to do that. I have been liaising with, I suspect it's the head of that group, and she has invited me to collect the data that we are relying on with respect to the mask, and that information is being collected, and I will forward it to them, and we will make an arrangement for a meeting subsequent to that. But I have been in discussions with that individual via email.
Supplementary.
Supplementary?
Will the Honourable Minister keep colleagues in the House updated on the results of that meeting?
I suspect they'll do that instead, but yes, absolutely. And again, I indicated that we would try to do that, arrange for a meeting. However, I'm trying to collect all the data which they've requested first. They've asked me if I would provide them with the information that we're relying on insofar as our public health decisions, to provide that to them first before we have a meeting, and I'm honoring that request.
Thank you, Honourable Minister.
Okay. Second sub, none?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Good. MP Jackson, you had indicated you had questions. Did you cover your base in the supplementaries, or did you still have questions you wanted to put?
Yeah, I'd still like to ask the question just briefly. And good morning, Minister. I'm just curious, on page 5, where you say from April onwards, the public health emergency will be in place to support only the continued requirement to wear a mask indoors. I'm just wondering whether there will be any accommodation made for children in our school system and wearing masks in the classroom all day.
Thank you for that question, Honourable Member. Obviously, that is something that has been heavily discussed in recent weeks. The provisions here, as announced previously, as well as as supported by the Chief Medical Officer and the colleagues here at the Ministry, is that, as I said in the statement, the increased transmission levels, the ability to transmit the virus, which does spread through air droplets, is highly increased through, is highly mitigated, through the use of masks. And unfortunately, here in Bermuda, we do have children that live in multi-generational households, and we are still concerned that the removal of masks will cause challenges as it relates to our inability to decrease the transmission. In the United Kingdom, the MHRA, you'll note, has indicated that they're allowing vaccinations for 5 to 11-year-olds only for vulnerable children, whereas our equivalent vaccine committee here in Bermuda is wishing to immunize all 5 to 11 children, principally because of what I've said previously, MP Jackson, that we have so many people that live in so many children, that live in multi-generational homes, and we're needing to try to protect not just the children, but the great-grandparents that are also living with them. And notwithstanding that there is still quite a lot of discussion on this topic, there is still substantial, overwhelming evidence to support the fact that mask wearing does reduce transmission of COVID very, very well. And we have to do what we can to protect. And those are discussions that will continue, but at the point where we are now, it is still being recommended by the Chief Medical Officer and the technical team here and the epidemiologists that mask wearing must be continued to be worn indoors as well as within our school system so as to protect and minimize and mitigate against transmission.
Thank you. No supplementary.
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 To that question,
Supplementary.
to that question, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
In light of the fact that our children not only work together in the classroom with a mask on, and they play together outside in the school fields without a mask, how do we believe that masks are being effective in a school setting?
As we've spoken previously, we are more concerned about the level of transmission, and you've probably heard me say this a million times, with respect to closed spaces and close proximity. When children are indoors and persons are indoors, in the absence of wearing masks, with less ventilation and the like, there is a higher chance of transmissibility. Outdoors is a different situation, as we can appreciate, because you've got the wind and other elements that are helping to minimize the impact. But when you're in an enclosed space with less ventilation, the best prevention for minimizing the transmission of the virus is through masks.
Any
Supplementary.
supplementaries?
Supplementary, MP Perman.
MP Perrin, put your supplementary.
Yes. Thank you, Minister. I'd understood your answer to be that from the 1st of April onwards, the wearing of masks will be the only reason for continued emergency powers. And I just want to make sure I'm not confused. You mentioned large gatherings. Will they not be relevant for emergency powers after the 1st of April with SafeKey or not? I'm confused.
That's right. And let me just try to clarify that.
Thank you.
Regulations that we've just announced today deal specifically with the removal of SafeKey, as well as large group gatherings will increase to 100. However, in order for us to continue any public health measures, such as the mandatory wearing of masks indoors, we are required to extend the public health emergency. So when we extend the public health emergency on the 31st of March.
Members, we are allotted our timeline for our question and answer period. We started at 11:20 and it's now 12:20, which signifies we've used up our 60 minutes and you hear the alarm going off here beside me. So, members, thank you for your participation in the question and answer period. We now have to move on. And those questions that we did